Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. Our guest, Chris Czynszak, he's got the biggest cup I think I've ever seen come on a show here. And my buddy Dave Tedder in Vegas connected us, and we're going to talk to Chris here today about a great event that he has that you run quite a bit. So why don't we just jump in, Chris?
Yeah, so well, it used to just be the Rock and Pod Expo, but now there's so many events surrounding it that it's now called Rock and Pod Weekend, and started in 2017, and we're now doing it for the 6th time this year.
That's incredible. So when everything was shut down, did you find a different way to do it? Did you do it virtually to keep it going? How did you do that?
No, we looked into that, but I mean, one of the main things about this is it's just everyone kind of getting off Facebook, getting together, and hanging out in person. So it was just we looked into it, but it wasn't quite, it just wasn't going to be the same. So it's kind of like, let's just take the year off. So we took 2020 off, but that's the one year that kind of hamstrung us. We did take 2022 off because I've got a kid that was graduating high school, and I was like, I got to get my priorities in order and do the family thing for a little while. And but now we're back full steam ahead again.
So I guess we'll talk about the event, but what a lot of people don't realize, I my podcast just came out of it was a COVID project that I thought was going to be a 4 or 5 week sort of thing, and I'm a musician that plays. I was playing 45 weeks a year. And then nothing. So I figured, hey, you know what? I'll just do this for 4. If I'll be a podcaster, it'll be cool. And all of a sudden, here I am, almost 3 years later. Talk to me about how you got into it. And what you cover.
Yeah. So, well, for me as a podcaster, I started that in 2011, pretty far back. So I'm in my 12th year doing it. But I used to do rock journalism, and I would do interviews and stuff, and just got fed up with transcription. Basically, that was kind of that's the long and short of it. And I would record interviews, and then I got an office job and got an iPod and discovered what podcasts were, and started with the comedy shows and interview shows. And I was just like, well, I think I could probably do this, and that's kind of what led me on my path. But it's changed quite a bit since 2011. Back then, I would tell someone I had a podcast, and they're like, "What the hell is a podcast?" So I have to explain less what I do now compared to back then.
Are you more audio? Are you more video? You a little of both? What do you do?
Are pretty much audio for mine. We once in a while we'll get on YouTube and do a live stream, and we got into that mostly because of COVID at the time, and we were doing it every Friday for a while. It was a lot of fun, but as everything that comes off looking like just a couple of guys hanging out talking, there's a lot more work that goes in, behind the scenes. So, but yeah, it's been pretty much just an audio thing for me.
Right now, I started out audio, went video, and then I had some people that were like, "Oh, well, can you download it, audio?" Because they like to go to the gym or they like to listen to it in the car. So it is good to have, an audio, I guess, first, or definitely have that form.
Yeah, I mean, and video wasn't much of a thing when I started. It was audio was the main ticket at the time, but yeah, I mean, with the pandemic, live streaming really took off, and or live internet radio shows, because that was a big thing in the early 2000s.
Sure.
And then it kind of died, and then podcasting got big, and then I've noticed in the last couple of years that internet radio streaming shows have really blown up again.
It's interesting. So, I mean, and I don't know if you experienced it down there, but there was all these sort of platforms popping up, and a theme for us was if you weren't taking advantage of technology, you were really kind of falling behind and missing the boat. But then you get people that and not to throw any barbs, they weren't necessarily professional, whatever, musicians, sportscasters, but they were doing podcasts. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't. Dream rose to the crop. The other stuff kind of fell by the wayside. Did you notice some of that down there in your neck of the woods when that was going on?
Oh, sure. And that's the fact that podcasting is great because anyone can do it. But at the same time, it's also, there's always a lot of turnover because, and I always tell people, there's people that'll come to me like, I want to start a podcast and I'm going to spend $2,000 on audio gear. And I'm like, oh, hold your horses. Get through, you can get decent equipment for less than like $100, $200. But I always tell them, do your first 10 episodes, get 10 episodes under your belt first. And then if you want to invest more, because they call it pod fading, where people will jump in with both feet, and then it's either a thing of they run out of stuff to talk about, or in a lot of cases, a lot of people will start thinking they're going to get rich off of it. And it's like, it's not, yeah, that you're in it for the wrong reason. If you're doing it for the money, you have to have a passion for what you're talking about to stick to it and let your audience build organically. So there's a lot of shows that'll start and then stop. But I tell anyone, if you get past 10 episodes, you're good. If you get past 100 episodes, you're pretty legit at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah, that, and I mean, I'll ask you where your content comes from. I mean, my content comes from people saying, "Hey, can you get this person on, or can you interview this person or talk about this subject?" I started out because I didn't think it was going to be a thing, man. I thought, iPhone 7 was how we started out. We kind of upgraded a bit here and there, but where does your show ideas come from? Where does your content come from? That type of thing.
Yeah, so early on, I tried to do mostly an interview show, and I have a great co-host, Aaron Camaro, who comes from a radio background. And so we're very different personality types, and are also different on what we want to do. And but we change our theme all the time. We don't stick to a particular thing. It's not all interviews. We don't really do as many interviews as we used to, because it's also a lot of scheduling. You got to chase people down and all that, and you don't know how it's going to go. And then also a lot of guests will do, I guess you call it a junket, where they'll appear on like 20 different shows. And it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to be lumped in like that. So a lot of our stuff is we pick a certain subject, or we'll do an episode on new bands that are independent, or we'll pick a year. We'll do a year in review show. We'll do a top 5 or the best and worst of a band. And that's kept it fresh for us to be able to do it 12 years later. I'm glad we didn't stick to a particular format, because you never know what you're going to get week to week with our show.
And it's such a learning curve too, right? Because I mean, like, our first, I don't know, I'm going to say 20 episodes, it was just like 45 to 50-minute chats that were just like, oh my God, nobody's going to, but we thought, hey, everybody was going to really tune in. And then, we got it down to a couple of segments type thing, depending upon what we're talking about. The short hits, I find, are the best ones, because you get the nice little sort of snippets when you're doing interviews where, now there can be painful ones where somebody isn't super talkative, but for the most part, if somebody knows they're only going to have to spend 10 to 15 minutes, you're going to get some pretty interesting material out of them.
Yeah. And we've had some of those long episodes. Sometimes it works out good, but then I'll have people come to me, because I've done it for a while, and we're going to start a show, and I'll say, all right, well, what's your show going to be about? And we're just going to talk about whatever. And I'm like, oh, don't do that. Unless you're coming as a, already known entity and you have a following, you're going to have a hard time, because people will tune out quickly. They have short attention spans.
You bang on. And the other thing too is, I mean, it's a big world. Podcasting is a big world, but it's also a small world, because the guests talk and they go, well, hey, have you ever been on this guy's show and whatever, or this girl's show? And so, if you're a good host, if you're a respectful host, if you're respectful of their time, and you don't answer or ask maybe questions that they don't want to answer, you're going to have some success. If you're, is that what you find? That's what I found, but I don't know. Is that what you find?
Yeah. I mean, we've never been the type of show to go after like the salacious blabbermouth headline materials. I mean, sometimes it lands in your lap depending on who the guest is, but we typically don't. We're not trying to dig up dirt. To us, we're celebrating the music we love and wanting to give them a platform to push what they want to put. Try to keep it fun and ask interesting questions. But you got to be respectful of their time, respectful of what they're pushing at the time. Like if they have a new album out and they want to talk about it, you can dive in a little bit on their past, but don't make your whole interview basically their past. And then at the end say, hey, you got a new album out, right? That's not a good idea.
Sure. And I mean, not being prepared is another bad one where, you can tell, like, now some people can, think on their feet and figure out how to not be prepared and make something look decent. But I mean, like, I've seen some painful ones where somebody shows up and they don't know who the heck the guest is. They have no background whatsoever. And they try to make something interesting out of it. And it's very tough.
Yeah, that's part of why when we do an interview, it's with someone who we both have a vested interest in talking to, and we have a knowledge of them. So I mean, we have, taken on bands that are pushing something that we're not real familiar with, but we always do our homework before we get on the line with them. That would be disrespectful if you didn't.
No question. Not to put you on the spot, but one of your most memorable ones that you go, you know what, really proud of that one. And if somebody was to ask me for a bio and an example of something that I was proud of, it would be
a few big ones. One for me was Desmond Child, who wrote a lot of big hits through the day
nice.
back in the day, and he has a studio here in Nashville, and we lucked out and were able to go to his studio and interview him in person, and he has such a illustrious career. That was very proud of that one. And then some of them, some of our best interviews come with kind of lesser known people, but they were in the orbit of big names. Like one, and we sadly lost him last year, or in 2021, Gary Corbett, who was keyboard player for Kiss for many years. Gary not only gave us great interviews, but actually became a friend in the process because he lived locally. And but yeah, it was one of those things where I was excited to talk to him just because I'm a big Kiss nerd. But it was one of those interviews where the next day he texted, yeah, as you can see, he texted me and my co-host and said, did you guys inject me with sodium pentothal or something? Because you can actually hear me forget I'm being recorded, because he definitely let us in on a lot of behind the scenes stuff that Paul and Gene were probably not happy about. And this is the way I am. I hadn't released the episode yet. Or no, I had just released it, and I said, "Hey, do you want me to take stuff out? I will, because if a guest was like, oh, I'm uncomfortable about that being out there, I'll take it out. I'm not looking to capitalize off their dirt." And then he was just like, "No, I said what I said. That's the truth. I'm not going to work with them again anyway, so no big deal." But that his was a big one because there was a lot of kind of bombshells that he dropped on that episode.
That's amazing. And and like you, I'm always say, I want to be respectful. Is there any no-go zones? And even sometimes if somebody says, yeah, ask me whatever, I don't want to be that guy that asks that stupid question and maybe it's something that's recently happened. I just want it to be peppy. I want it to be upbeat, because I do find, and you might find this too, you throw it out there to try to get a guest and they're a little non-responsive, and it's possibly because of a bad podcast interview previous, and they don't want to be treated the same way.
Yeah. Oh, and with my event, I'm the guy who brings in the guests. So we've had some guests that return every year, and I'm not going to name a name, but like there's one coming back this year that came in 2019. And I was like, well, we're going to, part of the event is we do matchmaking with the guests and the podcast that register to come, and we set them up together to do interviews. So there's like a demand, and then we go back to the guest and say, how many interviews do you want to do? How much time can you devote to it? And then we line them up. And this guest, had some uncomfortable, well, it wasn't an uncomfortable interview in 2019 at the event, but Blabbermouth decided to run with an off-color quote from that interview. The interview was perfectly fine, but now he's gun shy about what he does in interviews. And he, let me know who wants to talk to me, and I need to, but I have to be respectful of that. And if I'm looking at it from their perspective, that's got to be a bummer. Like, you're pushing a new record. You did a stint in this band back in the day that lasted, less than a year, and it ended badly, but it was like 10 years ago. And you may make a reference to it that takes 10 seconds in this interview that's, half an hour long. And that's the one they seize on. And if I'm an artist, I could see how that would be pretty perturbing to deal with.
No question. I mean, I had a post on my personal Facebook thing this morning about news cycle and how, mainstream media actually works. And it's, they'll run with something that they don't maybe necessarily have all the information put together. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, a redaction, or and here's what we found out. And so they kind of get around that. If guys like you and I did that, we probably get roasted for it. And it's frustrating.
Oh, it is. And yeah, you want these people to be willing to come back on your show. I don't look to ever burn a bridge with somebody. And to me, it's, we're all human beings at the end of the day. Just because you sold, X million records doesn't mean that I have a right to take pot shots at you. You're a human being when it comes down to it.
No question. And I think it was, I had the absolute fortune to interview, and it was a pleasure to interview James Kotak last month. And he was in Kentucky, and he had an accident, and, great interview. He was super gracious. think it was last week, the new singer in Kingdom Come did an interview, and he had one. It was a snippet with him about this big, and the snippet about James, and then the whole rest of it was all quotes from my podcast of the interview that I did with James. And I felt bad because it was like I never sent it in. Somebody got a hold of it. And I sent James a note and said, look, man, I apologize. And he couldn't have been more gracious. But sometimes like stuff like that, you don't want that getting out there when you're doing what we do.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, as fans, and especially rock fans that don't do podcasts, I mean, it's easy to look at these rock stars or people you grew up listening to as almost like avatars, like they're not real people.
Right.
And it's, but when you interview these people and you get to know them, it does change your perspective, because it's kind of like, man, can you imagine being in the public eye and having, comment sections full of people just roasting you? And it's got to be brutal. So it's one of those things where I don't think people stop and think about, what if it was me in that position and something I said, or you made a mistake years ago and people are still just killing you for it.
It's really funny, Chris, because I mean, like, you go to a show, and I mean, if you're playing live, there's tons of these things, and and something that you do hits the net within seconds. And I remember a show that I did with it was 2 years ago. Well, it'll be 3 years ago soon, with the new band that I had. And we're just about to go on. A friend of mine comes up and he goes, "There's like 10 drummers in the audience. You're nervous." And all I could think of is, I got their $10. They can leave whenever they want. Right. And that was my response to, hey, you know what? I'm up here. I did the work. If you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I think anybody who puts herself out there should get at least some respect. It shouldn't automatically get punched in the face.
You would think so, but yeah, we've kind of groomed a society to where that's not the case anymore, unfortunately.
That's great. Let's talk about this event, because the esteemed Mr. Dave Tedder, he contacted me and I apologize for the snafu that we had. We had a power outage here. I'm up. I don't know if you know where Halifax, Nova Scotia is, but we've had an unseasonably warm winter. But the day we were supposed to do this originally, our power went out. So, but talk about this event, because this event, when he sent me the press on it, it looks super cool.
Yeah, it's a labor of love, but it's also incredibly stressful for me. But it's going pretty well. This year it's the biggest one we've ever done. We've got over 50 celebrity guests, from the rock world coming, and I'm not going to hit you with the whole list, but I mean, like, some of the highlights, obviously, Ron Keel, him and his label are doing. Most of these people are gonna be at the expo during the day, and then on Saturday night they're doing Keel Fest 2, which is, I don't know how Ron's voice is gonna hold up for this, but Ron Keel Band, a Steeler reunion, and then Crashing Wayward and the Fifth, who are on the RFK label, are gonna open the show. Nice. And that's gonna be an awesome show. But at the expo, all those guys will be there. Got Eddie Ojeda from Twisted Sisters is gonna be coming. Jason McMaster from Dangerous Toys, who also hosts a podcast. They're going to do their podcast live on stage at the event, which will be cool. Photographer Mark Weiss, members of Exodus, Accept, Great White, Craig Gass and Don Jameson, the comedians. Craig's on the Howard Stern show, and Don did That Metal Show, of course. The kind of I guess you would call the headliner, Eric Martin from Mr. Big, is nice. He's going to be involved the entire weekend. He's going to do a couple of songs at the pre-party Rare Hair concert. Then he'll be at the expo doing a live interview on stage. He's going to do several interviews with podcasters one-on-one. And then Sunday, we have a thing called Punchlines and Backlines with the comedians doing their set, but also Eric Martin will get up and do stand-up comedy for the first time, which will be cool. And then him and his bandmates are going to do an acoustic show to close out the weekend. But the expo is panels, interviews, tons of vinyl memorabilia, comic, horror, pop culture vendors of all types, signing sessions. And then also on Sunday, the comedians will do Mystery Science Theater style commentary to a showing of Kiss Exposed from the 80s, which should be funny.
How cool. Oh, man. And you know what? Congrats for putting all that together, because I know any event is it's a huge undertaking, and especially when you have that many people of that stature. Two really quick, you mentioned Ron Keel. I had the pleasure of interviewing Ron Keel on my birthday 2 years ago. Oh, cool. And I felt like I was it was one part an interview and one part how to sell yourself sales infomercial. The guy's incredible when it comes to that stuff. He was amazing. Yeah. And Eric Martin, I interviewed Eric Martin, and the interview was great. But the best part was we were done. And he's like, "Well, what are you guys doing?" And nothing. He goes, "So I got nothing to do for the next hour." we sat and we didn't record it, but we just chatted with them on Zoom for 45 minutes or so, and we talked everything about Canada, the U.S. Canadian currency to craft beer. It was so much fun. So those are the things sometimes people don't get to see.
Yeah, and I went and saw Eric do an acoustic show in Alabama a little over a year ago. It was him and Tony Harnell, who was also one of the guests coming, and from TNT. And I couldn't help but be taken by Eric, his charisma and personality, even just between songs. It's almost like a stand-up set between songs. He's just so funny. And then I met him after his set, and he just couldn't have been more gracious and talkative. I got in touch with his manager, and I was just like, this event is tailor-made for him, and she's all excited about it. So yeah, I know he's going to have a good time that weekend.
That's incredible. And the event, and it's taking place where?
So the expo itself is Saturday, March 18th. It'll be at the Fairgrounds Nashville in one of their new buildings, and but the Rare Hair pre-party concert's at a place called Eastside Bowl. It's kind of like the Brooklyn Bowl chain of places where it's got a music venue, bowling lanes, a diner, and all kinds of cool stuff. Keel Fest is at a place called Bowie's, which is right in the heart of downtown Nashville. So if you want to experience the insanity of downtown Nashville on a Saturday night, it'll be happening there. Wow. And then the Comic and Pop Culture Convention on Sunday, same place at the Fairgrounds. The movie screening is at a place called Full Moon Cineplex, where they kind of show old horror movies and stuff. It's like decked out with cool stuff all over the lobby. We did Kiss Meets the Phantom there last year with the comedian, so that'll be cool. And then the weekend closeout thing with the comedy show and the Eric Martin show is at a place called the Vinyl Lounge, which it's a music event space, but it's housed in a building that produces vinyl records for bands. So it just made too much sense not to go with them.
That's incredible. I'm going to stay in touch with you because I want to find out when you do it next year, because, man, I have never been to Nashville, and B, I'd love to get down and see that. I mean, it just sounds like an absolute lights out event.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's it like I said, it's a labor of love. It's insane, but it always tends to go well, and people just have it's like, I just tell them it's great networking for show hosts and content creators, but in the artists, it's like a family reunion, and but it's just a fun hang. Like a lot of conventions are stuffy and sterile, and if you want to meet this celebrity, be at this line at 1 to 2 o'clock, and then after that you have no shot. Well, my event is more of just a hang. Like, a lot of them will do scheduled stuff, but they're typically hanging out all day long, so they're very approachable, and you can get stuff signed, you can ask them whatever question you want. It's just a lot of fun.
I think it must have been Dave Bramble at Three Sides of the Coin. He was talking about Vinnie Vincent did a convention a few weeks ago, and it was X amount to get in and X amount to, get this signed and whatever. And it really, I understand these guys got to do stuff for money, man. Everybody's got to pay the bills and make a buck and stuff like that. But I'd be interested kind of just to hear your thoughts on, some of how that takes place. Obviously, some of the bigger Kiss things, you get that. And I've had some friends that have gone on the Kiss cruises, but what are your thoughts with, I guess, how, the access to the fans in different sorts of ways that they have access to these folks?
Well, some of them, I mean, Vinny, I could come back on another time and we could do 3 hours on Vinny, because I have personal stories of dealing with Vinny on a business level. And it would take me a long time to explain that. But Vinny's kind of a special case. But anyway, but Kiss does this too, and a lot of artists do it, where it's thousands to go and do meet and greets and stuff like that. But to me, I mean, in the times we're living in, where album sales aren't what they were, these guys have to do what they have to do to make the bottom line. Yep. And meet and greets are expensive, but at the same time, you also got to look at what they have to pay their crew, gas money. There's a lot of, not that Kiss is shoestringing it right now, but to me, if you have that kind of money to do those kinds of meet and greets, more power to you. I personally don't really do that stuff. I got into the Night Ranger meet and greet the other night for free because a buddy of mine gave me a ticket, but otherwise I probably wouldn't have been there. It's not really my thing. If I meet somebody out and I get their autograph, great, but I typically don't pay to do that. But my event, there's some paid stuff for signatures and photos, but I like to think everything that we do is pretty reasonably priced. There's really no gouging going on. I don't do this to get rich. I do it to help expose people to the music and help these artists out.
Well, and like I say, I've done enough to contribute to the Nick and Sophie College Fund, so
I
can't do any more.
Yeah.
Last question. well, actually, I got one quick one, and then last question. But so it takes you a number of months to work on this event, and it's like literally you do the event, you maybe take a week off, and you're already a week later you're planning for the next one. Um, the high of it's there. Then it's the weekend, then all of a sudden it's done, and it's almost like the rug is pulled from underneath you. You have that feeling when you do it, or are you more like, oh, thank you God, we got her done, and let's look forward to next year?
It's usually relief for a few days after, and also just because I can, focus on other things, because it takes up a lot of your headspace when you plan something like this. But we have an awesome team that helps keep this thing going. It's definitely not a one-man show, but yeah, I mean, once the high of that wears off after a few days, it does kind of be like, wow, I'm not working on what I usually work on right now. So what am I going to do with myself? I'm not going to say depression, but yeah, it's definitely it's a change in the air for sure. But yeah, it takes almost a year every time to put it together.
No question. So my last question to you, sir, and I appreciate you doing this. How do my folks find you? And I'm really glad that we've made this connection, because I would love to have you on again and talk about some of this stuff. And people don't realize that, you do podcasts, and it's like, it's not all fun. It's not all games. It's hard work. So I'm glad that I met you. How do my folks find you?
Well, for me, my name's hard to spell, but if you just look up Decibel Geek for my podcast, if you want to check that out, and then for Rockin' Pod, just ROCK, the letter N, POD.com, and that's got all the ticket links, all the show information, and all that good stuff.
I'm going to send you my intro through Mr. Tedder, man. I'd like to stay in touch with you, see how the event goes, and I'd love to network with you some more, and just kind of pick your brain, because you've been at it longer than me. Like, I kind of fell ass backwards into it type thing. I never had any I'm a drummer in a rock band, man. I never had any aspirations to become a podcaster, but here I am. So thank you for your time. Best of luck with the events. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'd love to come back. You're an easy guy to talk to. I appreciate it.
We're gonna do that for sure. I sense that you and I could do probably a 10 or 11 parter on something.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Chris, and guys, look him up. Peace.